What was your immediate reaction when you saw Damian Lillard to the Bucks?
Well, before I get too critical here, I should ask you: do you think it's a good trade? Are you high on it for the Bucks?
Yeah,
Because I'm about to start making fun of the people that are
yeah,
galaxy branding this
yeah,
thing.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's like it's one of those things where it's really this simple to me. Now you have a pick and roll partner that you have to put two on the ball, and like Drew Holiday was a very productive pick and roll player last year. I pulled the numbers yesterday, but like there were 30 something players who ran at least 750 pick and rolls in the NBA last year, and Drew actually ranked fourth in points per possession. He had really good chemistry with Brook Lopez. He shot really well with his pull up 3-point shot last year. But like I'm watching the tape, and they're running like the most basic drop coverage against Drew because every other defensive coach is like, we like Drew, he's a good player, but we'd live with him, taking these shots, right? And you just simply cannot do that to Dame.
Yeah.
If you ran that coverage on Dame, he'd score like 1.7 points per possession. Like he'd be shooting 55% on pull-up threes. He'd be getting downhill and killing teams. So like it really is this simple. You have to show high or put two on the ball against Dame, which is just going to create absolute nightmare scenarios for the back line of your defense with Giannis barreling downhill with three good offensive players around him. Obviously, they got to shore up the two-guard position. Presumably right now they're thinking Pat Connaughton. I think I keep an eye on Reggie Bullock. He just got bought out by the Spurs. He's a guy that I'd look at there, especially since they're kind of weak in point of attack defense. And there are definitely some weird matchup things going on because I think the Bucks are like weirdly set up to beat Denver.
Yeah.
But like Boston's going to give them all kinds of issues with their perimeter defense. So like the league has a ton of parity now, man. Like we had three teams load up, right? Like we had the Suns load up, we had the Bucks load up, and the Celtics load up. The Nuggets looked unbeatable last year and ran it back, and then the Lakers added all this depth. So it's like there's just so much parity at the top of the league now.
Which is what you want if you're a casual fan of the league, I have to imagine. So that's very exciting. You mentioned the defense. I think this is the I was Jason. I was high on this trade for the Bucks. I thought if you can go out and get Damian Lillard, you should do it. But I guess like
bold stance.
This is stars teaming up or stars getting traded to a team with another. This is nothing new in the league, and we've seen it work. We've seen it not work. There are times where two super talented guys get thrown on a team and they just don't gel together. So if you're trying to nitpick and you're trying to say like this is how it could go wrong, and this is a way that removing Drew Holiday, putting in Damian Lillard. Yes, he's a better player individually, but what does it do to like undo some of the synergy that this Bucks team may or may not have had? If you were to nitpick it and say like this is a way that maybe they're not going to regret the trade. Obviously, you had to do it. Giannis was getting antsy, and it's Damian freaking Lillard. But if there's a world where you're like, maybe they kind of do miss Drew Holiday, like what does that look like to you?
It's the perimeter defense piece. So like think of it like this: in a Celtics series, let's just look 2 years ago. You have Drew Holiday as an option to put on one of the Jays, right? Like you're probably putting Drew Holiday on Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum and having Chris Middleton guard the other. And now that's just not an option anymore. Like you're not going to put Dame on one of those guys. So What that means is Giannis Antetokounmpo, who they prefer to keep as a low man. So like they prefer to keep Giannis Antetokounmpo guarding a non-shooter in the weak side corner so that he can help at the rim in pick and roll and also recover out to shooters. He's like one of like 2 or 3 guys in the league who can successfully do both without leaving an opening, right? But you can't do that anymore. He's going to have to guard probably Jaylen Brown, and he's going to have to slide those feet, and he's going to have to guard on the perimeter, which is, of all the things he does defensively, probably the one thing he's not great at. He can guard bigger, stronger players. We've seen him have success guarding the LeBrons and the bully ball players. He had some success guarding Kawhi last year. But when it comes to the really quick guys, he can have some trouble there. And so I think perimeter defense will be the thing. But like at the end of the day, you have to contend with them on the other end of the floor too. So it's not fair to be like, oh, they're going to have trouble guarding on the perimeter when you accept the reality that like, let's bring Kristaps Porzingis up and pick and roll against Dame Lillard and see how that goes. You know what I mean? So like it goes both ways is the simple way.
And I said on the show we did last week, like when it went down, that Giannis is, for as great as he is, and I do love Giannis, he might be, in terms of like the all-time superstars that exist in this league, he might be like one of the few guys where you cannot just throw him the ball and say, go create offense and go carry us because our offense is stalled. Like when the Bucks try to do that, like Giannis, I do love him. This isn't a criticism. I'm not like, I'm not being a Bucks hater. This is how I feel. His version of creating offense is just putting his head down and trying to use his freakish athletic abilities. And so to have a guy now in Dame, because I think like Middleton would get put in those spots where it's like, okay, so Chris, you go do it. And he's like, I'm not that guy. And Drew is like, I'm also not that guy. And so now to have a guy like Dame who's like, I very much am that guy, it's super exciting. And I think like, yeah, that was this is not just like a situation where like, let's just collect the best players we can find and hope that it works out together. I feel like Damian Lillard and Giannis are perfect for one another and perfect for especially like on the offensive end. I mean, especially, that's the correct read. Like these two guys, this is not going to be a situation where, a lot of times, and we'll talk about the Phoenix Suns in a second, but a lot of times like you get great basketball players on the same team and then you're like, yeah, but there's only one ball. This is not that, right?
It's a perfect synergy on the offensive end of the floor. Giannis actually has declined a little bit as a half-court shot creator in the last couple of years. He, in 2021, and this is the thing, it's so hard to do this as a front office, but like you kind of have to separate the way we look at the accomplishment from the realities of the accomplishment. Like they won the title in 2021. It's a legit title. I'm not undercutting it. I'm not trying to minimize the accomplishment. But you faced a Nets team that was down Kyrie Irving, and James Harden had the hamstring injury, right? You got to face an Atlanta Hawks team in the conference finals because Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, peed down their leg in the conference semis, right? And then you got to face a very good Phoenix Suns team, but with no top 10 players on the roster. So like when push came to shove, he didn't have to go toe to toe with the Steph or a Jokic or like one of those top tier half court shot creators, right? So like you can acknowledge the success and celebrate it while being like, okay, but what are we gonna do now? Because in order to get out of the East now, we're gonna have to face these higher caliber opponents, right? And so from that standpoint, like the Dame Lillard piece addresses their biggest weakness from the 2021 championship team which was their half court shot creation. You're right, Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton, they had moments, right? Like Drew hit big shots. Chris hit basically the game winner in Game 7 against the Brooklyn Nets, right? Like they hit big shots, but they weren't consistently reliable in those ways, right? And they were fortunately never up against an opponent that was so much better than them at half-court execution. So it worked out. So in this particular situation, Giannis's free throws have fallen off of a cliff. I can't remember the exact number, but it was insane. Giannis shot some putrid number outside of the restricted area this year. I want to say it was like 28%, and it was like atrociously bad. And so like he can't do that stuff. And in whatever little brief windows of it we saw in 2021, it actually regressed. He doesn't even have a left shoulder hook shot. Like he can't even rise up over Bam Adebayo from 7 feet and hit like a hook shot consistently. So like you needed somebody that could take over those late game situations and execute offensively. And that's what Dame's going to be able to do. And that completely relieves the pressure on Giannis. Now he can just be great at what he's always great at. He can devote more energy to, like, remember how fatigued he got in that Celtics series in 2022? Like, that's not going to happen anymore. Like, he's going to literally be a wrecking ball in all of the dirty work areas of the game. I think it makes perfect sense for them as a basketball fit.
Seeing Giannis in the playoffs and the defense is just simply not guarding him on the perimeter, and like the guy that's supposed to be guarding him standing under the basket, and Giannis is just looking at it. He's sizing it up. He's like, should I shoot it? He almost looks to the bench like, should I shoot it? And the coaches are like, no, please don't. And he's like, I'm gonna fucking shoot it. And then he shoots it, and it's an air ball. Oof. Just a brutal thing to watch. And I imagine having Damian Lillard on the team means a lot fewer instances of that, which I would be very excited about if I was a Bucks fan.